Hello everyone, welcome to Story Time. We are currently reading The Willigrews by Terry Tarbox, and he's a local author who lives in Lowestoft, and he's very kindly said that we can read his stories for story time. But today it's a little bit sad because it's the last chapter of The Willigrews that we'll be reading today. So I hope you've enjoyed this book, but we've still got one more chapter to go. So sit down, make yourself comfortable, snuggle up, and we will enjoy the last chapter of The Willigrews. The Willigrews and the Half-Baked Scone. Or scone. I know some people call it scone, but I'm afraid I'm someone who calls it scone. So you're just going to have to put up with that for this story. The Willigrews' next adventure started on a Wednesday. The day is not important, but I just thought I'd let you know that it didn't start on a Tuesday. Now, although many different tribes, most of whom were a bit dodgy and unfriendly, inhabited the country around Willigrew, the Willigrews' biggest friends were a tribe called the Dranglebinders. This other tribe were a bit like the Willigrews. They were peace-loving and didn't go in for bashing and biting and shouting insults. The Dranglebinders were a bit taller than the Willigrews, and they were pink. Their skin was quite smooth and shiny and glinted in the sun. The Dranglebinders were famous for their glinting. They were quite skinny, but had large knee and elbow joints. Their faces were quite ordinary, with the correct number of features in the usual places, but their normal expression made them look very miserable. Not that they were miserable, they just looked it. Even smiling didn't help much. The leader of the Dranglebinders was called Cyril. Cyril was a really nice bloke who would help anyone in trouble, and has been good to the Willigrews over the years. The Willigrews had a saying, "Cyril's all right, we owe him one." One day, Yill was sitting in the kitchen drinking a nice cup of chickweed tea, while Bromgley was arranging some chickweed flowers in a vase, when there was a knock at the door. It was their old mate Cyril. He looked a bit worried and miserable. "Come in, old friend," said Bromgley cheerfully. "How lovely to see you. To what do we owe this pleasure?" Cyril slumped down at the kitchen table and said, "I'm very worried and miserable. I don't know how to tell you this, but I've lost my tribe." "Lost your tribe?" gasped Yill. "Exactly," said Cyril. "Vanished, disappeared, gone, and any other word you can think of that means they're not there anymore. In other words, they're not where I left them." Cyril explained that he had gone away for a few days to sit up a tree and think about ways of making his tribe even happier than they already were. And when he returned, they had gone. Not a single Dranglebinder to be seen. Yill and Bromgley were as baffled as Cyril. The Dranglebinder tribe must have numbered a good 500. How could they all disappear at once? Bromgley asked Cyril if he wanted the Willigrews to go back to his village to search for the tribe. Cyril thought that this was a good idea and thanked his friend for helping. "I'll get a search party together and we'll leave straight away," said Bromgley, trying to reassure the unfortunate Cyril. Bromgley called for his son Roosin and asked him to bring Crowfin, Partiv, Parslino, Longstint and Dora. He didn't ask Vectorn because he couldn't leave his tribe without a leader. When the group had gathered, Bromgley explained what had happened and they set off to Cyril's village. As it was only 2 fields away, it didn't take the search party long to get there. When they arrived, Longstint went ahead to make sure it was safe for the rest to go into the village. As it was all quiet, he beckoned to the others and they followed him down the narrow path that led to the first dwelling. There was hardly a sound as they entered the house. Everything inside looked normal, with no sign of a rushed exit, no sign of any struggle. When they checked the other houses, they were the same, apart from a clock that was lying on the floor in one of the houses. "I'm baffled," said Bromgley, sitting on a bench on the village brown. Well, it hadn't rained for several weeks. "How could this have happened?" Dora suggested they might have found a last-minute holiday that was such good value that they couldn't pass up on it. Or they were standing in a long line, one behind the other, behind a tree, so they couldn't be seen from the front. Has anyone got any sensible suggestions? Asked Bromley, patting Dora on the head and smiling. Well, said Partiv, I did notice one strange thing, but I don't know if it's important. The others asked him what he'd seen, and he explained that when he was in one of the houses, he noticed that the oven door was open, and when he opened it, he found a half-baked scone. Parsleino added, I did notice that the scoreboard on the village brown suggested that whatever game was being played was unfinished. I think, said Bromley, that we ought to go back to the house with the scone and take another look. When they arrived at the house, Bromley looked carefully at the open oven and at the scone. Look, said Bromley, look closely at the scone. Parts of it keep disappearing and reappearing. The others stared in amazement. That's really weird, remarked Crowfin. But what does it mean? I think we should take another look at the clock that we saw in the other house, suggested Bromley. At the other house, Dora picked the clock up and gave it to Bromley. He examined it carefully and noticed that it had stopped and the minute hand was slightly bent. Do you know what I think? Asked Bromley. What do you think? Asked Cyril. Someone had to. I think this is a time case, explained Bromley, and the whole of your tribe has been transported to a different time-space thingy. Bromley asked the others to remember the time when Cringe had appeared out of nowhere. He had used a clock to travel, not across time, but to a parallel universe that occupied the same space as the Willigrews. Oh, yes, I remember, said Crowfin. You had to use your magic and say a rhyme to send Cringe back to Wimp. Do you think you can do it again with the Dranglebinders? Well, I'll give it a good try, replied Bromley. But that one was just one little creature, little Cringe. I don't know if it will work with a whole tribe. Bromley also warned everyone that a monster had come back the last time. It had been a friendly monster, but it had taken them ages to clear up the slimy mud from the lounge carpet. Dora suggested that Bromley use the same rhyme, but say it 500 times, once for every tribe member. Typical Dora. Bromley shook his head and concentrated. Then he began his rhyme, which went exactly like this. A whole tribe has gone, and this seems so wrong. So please bring back our neighbours and return them to their labours or whatever else they were doing. The Willigrews and Cyril stood and waited to see if Bromley's magic was going to work. Several minutes went by. 1 minute was riding a bike and waving. Another held up a sign saying, "Hello, Mum." Then suddenly, all at once and out of nowhere, came several loud bangs, followed by several puffs of smoke. This went on for about 5 minutes, with more and more bangs and puffs. Eventually, the smoke started to clear, and something very strange appeared on the village brown. There, to the amazement of all present, was a selection of legs, hundreds of them, all running round in circles and triangles and various other shapes. "Oh no," cried Bromley, "we've only brought back part of the Dranglebinders. We've left their tops behind." Before Bromley could finish speaking, he was interrupted by several more bangs and puffs. Out of the sky came a selection of DIY tools, hammers, screwdrivers and electric drills. There was also an invoice which Crowfin thought was pretty good value. "Do you think," asked Crowfin, "that your magic rhyme has turned the Dranglebinders' top halves into a selection of very useful tools for general use around the home?" "I hope not," replied Bromley with a worried look on his face. "I'll have to think of a different rhyme and hope for the best." Bromley concentrated his thoughts and tried again. "I'm going to try again to bring back the Dranglebinders, but please don't send back tools like drills and angle grinders." After several more minutes, there were the usual bangs and puffs, and then came the Dranglebinders' tops, hundreds of them. They whirled around above the legs and gradually landed with a plonk on top, creating whole Dranglebinder bodies. Everyone clapped their hands in celebration until someone shouted, "Hey, these aren't my legs. They look too knobbly." Then someone else said, "I've got the right legs, but they're facing the wrong way." "One of my arms is a screwdriver," wailed another. "Oh dear," exclaimed Cyril, throwing his hands up in horror. He caught them on the way down. "What are we going to do?" "Don't panic," said Bromley reassuringly. "At least we've got them back. We'll just have to think of something else." Parsino suggested that they had two options. Bromley could try another rhyme with the risk of something much worse happening, like a vicious bread roll with green ears, or they could leave things as they were and the Dranglebinders would have to try to get used to their new legs. The one with knobbly legs said he might be able to get used to them, and the one with the screwdriver arm said it might come in handy. However, the one with legs the wrong way round was not so happy. "How will I manage?" he complained. "I won't know if I'm coming or going, and if I go somewhere, I might be back before I leave, and when I get back, I'll probably be halfway there." "Well," said Cyril, "I think you'll have to get used to walking backwards. We'll all help. After all, at least you'll be able to see where you're going." This seemed to reassure the unfortunate little Dranglebinder, and he wandered off backwards, falling over a little bit, then standing up and trying again. When they were certain that everyone had come back from the parallel time, all the Dranglebinders gathered around the Willigrews, and Longstint shouted, "3 cheers for Bromley!" There followed much clapping and whooping and cheering and general happy silliness. Or was that silly happiness? You decide. Then Cyril thanked Bromley and the rest of the Willigrews for their help, and both tribes did the Willigrue national dance, hopping around and flicking their earlobes and bumping into each other. When things had settled down and the Dranglebinders had gone back to their homes, Cyril invited the Willigrews in for a bit of something to eat. Cyril explained that he didn't have much in the larder, but he did have some instant chickweed porridge that he could rustle up. "Yummaroony," said Dora, "my favourite. May I have some honey on mine?" "Of course," replied Cyril. "I also have some jangleberry jam." Cyril's wife, who was called Cyril's missus, was sitting by the fire, still recovering from her travels in time and space. But eventually she said, "I hope I never have to go through that again. That was really hairy." Cyril asked her if she was ready to tell them about her strange journey, and she said she thought so. "In your own time, of course," said Dora, and everyone laughed. As the others munched and slurped, Cyril's missus began her story. "I was sitting reading the Daily Dranglebinder at the table," she said, pointing to the table where the Willigrews were eating. "I started to feel a bit dizzy," she continued. "I got up to walk over to the sink to get a drink of water, when suddenly I was somewhere else. I knew it was somewhere else because it wasn't where I had been when I felt dizzy." What was it like there?" asked Partiv. "Believe me, this place I landed up in was seriously weird," she replied. "There were tools everywhere, hammers, spanners, pliers, all over the place. I just started to explore when the rest of the tribe started appearing. We were all very frightened and didn't know what to do. Then we all jumped when a loud voice came from a small creature sitting on a workbench. It looked to me like it was made from wood shavings and glue. "Choose the tools you want," the creature said, "and we'll deliver in a couple of days, but don't forget all prices exclude VAT. Also, for one day and for one day only, we have a special offer on chisels. Buy 2, give 1 back. So the more you buy, the more you can give back." We decided to humour the little wood-shaving creature and started to pretend to select some tools. Then someone shouted, "Ah, my legs have disappeared." Within a few minutes, everybody's legs were gone, and we all hit the floor, kaplunge, together. I don't mind telling you that we were all in a panic by now. We couldn't run around, of course, so we all waved our arms about and shouted things like, "Where are our legs?" and "I'd put my foot down if I could." Then there were 2 small puffs and a large flash, and we were back here with you. Everyone shook their heads in amazement. Cyril thanked the Willigrews again for their help, and a little later, after much waving goodbye and blowing of kisses and general friendliness, the Willigrews wandered back to their village. When they had completed the short journey and arrived in Willigrue, They were expecting a bit of a welcome party. To their surprise and disappointment, they arrived to total silence. The village was deserted. Not a Willigrew in sight. "Oh no," gasped Brongleigh. "The Willigrews have disappeared, just like the Dranglebinders." He need not have worried, however, because suddenly from behind a bush jumped Vectorn. "Surprise! Surprise!" she shouted. "We're all still here, just thought we'd play a little joke." Then all the other Willigrews appeared and cheered Then all the other Willigrews appeared and cheered the returning heroes. They all started to chant, "Brongleigh, Brongleigh, Brongleigh, you the man, you the man." Well, that's it. That's about it for this little adventure. We'll leave the Willigrews doing their national dance and let them get on with their lives until the next adventure, which will, of course, be very silly. So that's the end of the book, The Willigrews. I hope you've enjoyed that, but don't worry, we will be back tomorrow with some new stories. We've got a lot of exciting stories coming up, so we hope that you'll carry on listening. 2 o'clock every day for story time. So I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.